I was crying within minutes, and I couldn't believe it, really. I was equally shocked that she hadn't worn a seatbelt. I couldn't understand how anybody could go in a car like that. I also couldn't understand how they persuaded the driver, who was 3 times over the the level of alcohol, to let them drive, and that she turned down Prince Charles's offer of paying for all her support and all the people guarding her. And I just thought it was the most terrible tragedy, but also a lesson to ourselves that actually you can't make these very quick decisions, especially if you're so famous, without actually making sure that everything is okay. And I think that's a terrible thing to have lingering so many years later, if only. A lot of people say if only, but actually this, apparently, if she'd had a seatbelt on, she had 80% chance of survival.
I interviewed the other guy, the survivor, Trevor Rees-Jones, the bodyguard. He survived because he had his seatbelt on.
Yes.
The Henri Paul was office head on drink and drugs. There are still people who are reluctant to accept a mundane reason for the loss of Diana, Princess of Wales. It's almost as if they can't accept that drink driving, which still takes off, dozens of people every year, could take off somebody quite so extraordinary, but it did. And yet people persist in peddling conspiracy theories about MI5 and Prince Philip and all the rest of it. Can you understand why that happens?
They still are. I think people don't want to face the reality of what happened and how it happened, and so somebody makes up something, and then everybody piles onto that, and it's absolutely absurd because there were tremendous amount of investigation seeing what happened. The same way that they said she was pregnant, but there was absolutely no sign of that. Doctor after doctor has said there was absolutely no sign. But I think if people don't want to believe it, they don't believe it. And actually, we need all to grow up and be sensible that sometimes things happen, the absolute calamity and utterly horrible, but they are real and you have to accept them. And I think that's quite important for us to do.
Did you feel that it was a case of newspapers doing their job in acting as tribunes of the people, or did they go over the top in the context of, we just had Neil Wallace, who at the time was the deputy editor of The Sun in 1997, and he was clearly of the mind that the newspapers all agreed that the royals had to, the Queen had to come down from Balmoral. But I just wonder whether you think that was a mistake.
Well, I worked just opposite Kensington Palace, and I and a couple of colleagues went over every single morning for that first week, and we saw the flowers coming up and we saw the mood change of the people. First they were silent, they couldn't speak, they were so upset. Then there were tears and crying, and then there was aggression and angry, and they were really saying, where is the Queen? Where is her? Where is she? She must come down.
Well, I remember the newspaper headlines asking, I don't know to what extent the newspapers reflected public anger or to what degree they stoked it. I do remember the Daily Express, what was it, show some, where are you, Mum, or what, there was...
But that was there for us to see. It wasn't actually something that came from the papers. We went back and spoke to the editor and said, this is what's happening, it's very dangerous. I think where the fault was that the Queen didn't have someone explain on her behalf that she had chosen to keep the 2 boys up there to soften the immediately terrible feeling that they'd lost their mother, and that it wasn't a good idea to bring them down very quickly. We didn't know that for several days, and I think it was blowing up, well, the Queen didn't like her, and why isn't she doing it? But I think there was a mistake from the aides of not actually putting out a statement very early. And the thing is that when the Queen did come down and speak on the eve of the funeral, she explained things and everything softened. Everyone realised that actually she was acting as a grandmother, not as a queen, and she wanted to protect her grandsons. And it made sense, but it wasn't done quick enough, I think.